Hello, welcome to Podsongs. I'm Jack Stafford, and I interview inspiring people in service to others as inspiration for a brand new song. As you may or may not know, I started the Podsong project as a way to promote the Aetherius Society, which is a spiritual organisation that I'm a member of. And today I'm going to speak with one of the international directors in London. Please welcome Mark Bennett. Why don't we kick it off with how you joined the society?
I was my first encounter with the Aetherius Society was when I was 14, living in rural Sussex, and my parents were discussing what to watch on television that evening. And of course, in those days, we only had 4 channels, so this was regarded as quite an important conversation, how to spend the evening, and there wasn't a great deal of choice. And my mother was very enthusiastically putting forward the case that we should watch this documentary about the planet Venus. And I was quite surprised by this because my mother was not particularly interested in space or anything cosmic as far as I was aware. But there was nothing else on, so my father and I didn't really argue, and we watched this program. It was a Horizon documentary, and most of it was quite scientific in the normal sense. And there was this short segment, probably about 5 minutes, which included an interview with a staff member of the Aetherius Society in Los Angeles, and some footage of Operation Prayer Power. And it all seemed to me at that time to be obviously very strange. I'd never really encountered anything quite like it. And I certainly wouldn't say that I believed it. You know, maybe there are some people who would say, yeah, I saw the Aetherius Society and that was it. I knew this was for me. I didn't have that. I was fascinated. I was intrigued. But I was certainly not convinced. But I wanted to know more. And, you know, again, in those days, it was 1994, so it wasn't that easy to find out more. I couldn't just go online. But I watched every TV program I could that was anything to do with extraterrestrial life. And I even remember going to a bookshop and trying to find a map of I did find a map of Los Angeles and trying to locate the address that I'd seen of the Aetherius Society, and then trying to, work out the full address because it was only part of the address. From this one TV show, which I don't even remember what happened really, but I don't think I ever found any kind of coherent address. But there was a program maybe a year or two later, which gave you the option of writing in to any of the religions featured on the program. I think it was called Desperately Seeking Something. And that was the first time, as far as I remember, that I realized, that I found out that the Aetherius Society also had a center in the UK. I was thrilled to learn this, and I wrote into the TV show to get the little booklet with all the addresses of these unusual religions. And then I wrote into the Aetherius Society asking questions. Then I started calling to ask questions, and people were very helpful in the answers they gave. And then I attended for the first time while Dr. King was actually still alive. He was in Los Angeles at the time, of course. Well, he was in Santa Barbara, to be more precise. At the time, it was the first I attended the first Sunday service of 1997, which is, of course, the year he passed away. And gosh, it's interesting to think back on that. It's such a long time ago now. I feel very privileged, although I never had the privilege of meeting him. I do feel privileged to at least have been able to attend the Aetherius Society activities in his lifetime. But even then, I was very keen, but I wouldn't say I was absolutely convinced. It was very much a slow learning curve for me. And I became really convinced probably shortly before my 18th birthday. And I became a member on my 18th birthday, which was also a prayer power day, which was a happy coincidence, so to speak. So I was able to take part in prayer power on that special day, my birthday, and the day I became a full member. And I got a blessing from Richard Lawrence on that day as well. So I think sort of what I take away from the whole experience is that, you know, the teachings of the Aetherius Society are very advanced and as such seem very strange. Not because they are strange, they're not really strange, but we live on a very strange planet. If you live on a strange planet, then that which actually is logical and normal in galactic terms is going to seem strange. And since then, it's although I'd say I was convinced at that age and have remained convinced, but it's become, how can I put it? It's a bit like looking at a black and white picture, and you're convinced you can see what's in the picture, but over time, that picture comes to life with color. And I'd say that virtually every day that I live the Aetherius Society life, you know, that picture becomes more real, more vibrant, more clear, deeper. It's an amazing thing. It's not, you hear people sometimes talking about their crisis of faith and that they want to believe in various religions.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an issue I've really come across in the Aetherius Society, because you're not trying to believe something for belief's sake. You're appreciating something that is actually real. So as long as you don't sort of turn away from truth, as long as you don't want to turn away from truth, then that kind of a problem doesn't really seem to exist once you put in a certain degree of effort, which you do have to do, to find out that it's true. And then it's no longer a question of belief, it's a question of understanding. There's actually a great quote by Isaac Newton. I don't remember it actually word for word, but it's very close to the following. It's something like, you know, you can believe anything, but you can only understand that which is true. And I think there's a lot of depth to that, in that if something is a nonsense or even part nonsense, or just a bit off in one way or another, you can only understand it insofar as it's not off. Yeah? But if something is absolutely true, it's there for your divine faculty of logical appreciation to resonate with the divine aspect of manifestation, which is logic.
So going back to before you decided to become a member, can you remember maybe a tipping point, or what?
Yeah, no, it was. Yes, I suppose there were probably a few. There were in the beginning. I was very opinionated as a teen. Well, I'm still very opinionated, but I was very opinionated as a teenager as well. And there were, to be honest, a lot of things about the Aetherius Society that I didn't agree with. I mean, in the very beginning, I didn't even agree with karma and reincarnation. I even remember discussing this with a teacher at school when I was, I don't know, certainly no older than 12, probably about 10. And she mentioned quite flippantly something to do with past lives. I think she believed in past lives, but it was just an off-the-cuff kind of a comment. And I said to her, I don't believe in reincarnation. So it was that kind of ingrained in me, even at a very young age, to have opinions about these things. And, of course, in the Aetherius Society, reincarnation is a very fundamental aspect of our belief. And it came to the point where whenever I disagreed with something, after looking into it a bit, I realized that I was wrong. And then it got to the point, I actually remember the very moment when I thought this, it got to the point where I thought, well, hang on. This keeps happening. I keep disagreeing, looking into it, and then finding out that I was wrong. So maybe I should just assume that the Aetherius Society teaching is right and try to understand it rather than arguing about it. Not take it in blind faith, but try to understand it in an open-minded way with a kind of an assumption that almost certainly I was going to find out that it would be right. So that was kind of the logical aspect of my journey.
That's a very enlightened thing to do. Not many people, I can't get over myself like that. I mean,
in what way?
I keep banging my head against brick walls, and but you really stood out of yourself and said, probably what I'm thinking is wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I was just sort of fed up with fighting a losing battle, to be honest. All I wanted was truth. I didn't really have any agenda in the sense of I didn't want to believe in the Aetherius Society because I liked it, or I didn't want to disbelieve in it because I didn't like it. It was just, well, this seems to be truth, so let's, keep going in that direction because that seems to be working in the journey of my understanding. So that was the logical aspect. There was a sense perception aspect, which was not seeing a UFO or anything kind of like that, but it was very important to me. And that is when I first started practicing Aetherius Society practices, prayer and mantra and visualization in the way that we do it in the society, I began having pretty intense physical sensations. I felt a very strong kind of a pressure in the solar plexus and in the forehead, and generally in a different way, but in the aura. And when I first started to feel these things, it didn't take very long. I don't remember how long. It wasn't the first time I ever did the 12 blessings, but it was pretty soon thereafter. And I was thinking, what the hell is going on with me? What is this? I mean, it wasn't painful, but it was, I'd say there were elements of discomfort in it because it was so unfamiliar and so intense. And I thought, hang on, I'm trying to do something good here and I'm getting all these weird feelings. What the hell is this about? And at that time, it seems unbelievable now, but at that time, I didn't even know that the solar plexus was a chakra and that there was a chakra in the forehead. And I must have known something about the aura, but I think with the aura, I think I did sort of have a sense of it, but I was still pretty blown away by how intense the feeling was. And the fact that at least some of these sensations I didn't even know what they were at all, namely definitely the solar plexus. I definitely didn't know that. The aura and the Christ center sensations. I think I may have had an inkling, may have read something to that effect, but I still didn't really get it. So I wasn't sitting there thinking, now if I do this, I'm going to feel something in the solar plexus, in the aura, and in the Christ. Not at all. It took me quite by surprise. So this was kind of like just the clue I needed that something really was happening. Because it couldn't have been psychosomatic, because I didn't know it was meant to be happening. Yeah, or maybe not meant to be happening, but that it made sense that it might happen. Yeah, I didn't know at all. So I can't, for all the listeners are concerned, I could be making the whole thing up. So it's not proof to anyone listening, but it was proof to me, or at least very strong evidence to me. And that's what you get on the path. You get the proof that you need. If you really want truth, number one, and number two, you want it for the right reason, not just so you can sort of show off as some fancy guru or something, but so that you can use that knowledge of truth to help others. If you have those two faculties in your motivation, and you're willing to put in the effort, and it doesn't take that much. You don't have to climb Everest 6 times or something. You just have to put the effort in, be sincere, and keep at it. And then you must get truth. And if you need a certain kind of proof, you will get it. For some people, that might be seeing a flying saucer. For other people, that might be a psychic sensation. For some people, it might just be an intuitive realization. Whatever. These things are quite varied. But if your motive is right, you will get whatever you need. This is an absolute guarantee on the path. So people who sort of express skepticism and disbelief and all that, of course, it's understandable, but it's right there for the taking if you really want it. You just have to have an open mind, the right motive, and put in a reasonable amount of effort. And I think, I've talked about, the sense perception aspect of it, in terms of, it's kind of a psychic sense perception aspect, but it's still sense perception. Talked about the logic, but really the thing that I think grabbed me in the beginning, and sort of has continued grabbing me ever since, in harmony with the sense perception and the logic, but probably as the primary factor nevertheless, is an intuitive realization that this is truth. Because it didn't really make sense to me in the beginning why I would even be that interested in the Aetherius Society. Yes, over time I began to understand it logically and I had these psychic sensations, but that took a bit of time. It wasn't immediate, but the immediate thing, which manifested in the conscious mind as curiosity, but I think was in fact, that was a manifestation of the superconscious intuitive realization that this was truth. Yeah. So you've got those three things, really. You've got sense perception, whether it be psychic or non-psychic, logic, and intuition. These are the ways to know truth. And if you dedicate yourself to these, then you will have you'll begin to have a rounded understanding and appreciation of truth. Some people veer more to one than the other. I'd say personally my favorite is probably the logic. I love the logic of it.
Me too.
It's maybe it's our sort of Western 20th century, 21st century minds
Aquarian could be the.
Whereas you might have someone else who was maybe, in a different place, different culture, different kind of education and values, who might be far more intuitively astute than we are. Or then again, you might have someone who'd grown up in an environment where psychic phenomena were far more the norm, or they may have themselves a particularly strong ability in that area, which they would have earned from previous lives. And maybe that's what helps them on the path. So it doesn't really matter what brings you onto the path, as long as it gets you there. But the more advanced you get, there will come a time for everyone when you have to embrace all three aspects. You can't go, all the way to adeptship or mastery just on a sort of intuitive feeling without any sense of logic. And likewise, you can't go there just logically without any intuition. And of course, psychic powers and the ability to correctly use the senses and perceive things through the senses. These are all essential on the path to take you the whole way. And I think that Dr. George King was very remarkable in this respect, in that he, more than any other teacher that I can think of, I'm not saying there isn't another one, but more than any other teacher I can think of, he really emphasized the logical aspect. He certainly emphasized intuition too, but the logic, you kind of expect him to emphasize intuition, but the logic, he really bangs it home to us that, this is very important. And he talks about it a lot in his own thought process as well. And of course, we know that he was a master of psychic abilities, and had had some, astounding experiences in this regard, which might even send the average person a bit crazy, but they didn't send him crazy, because he had that, that perfect balance, that control, which enabled him to appreciate God from all sides, I would say.
Mm-hmm. When you think about skeptics, the ones I've spoken to, they kind of think they already know the answer, so they don't look for or examine any evidence. They don't go and read a book about reincarnation or this. They just when ideas are presented, they can tell you why they're wrong or something, or as evidence. But they don't have this. They're not searching for truth.
Well, you can't fill a glass that isn't empty. If the glass is already full, it's full. That's obviously just an analogy, but it's quite a useful one. I find that also with people of any strong viewpoint is you can't change their mind. I mean, I haven't tried for years really to change anyone's mind, but as a teenager, I used to a bit in my youthful idealism and enthusiasm, and it never worked. Because it's just that if someone is already convinced of something, you're not really gonna be able to help them very much. So I mean, now when this sort of thing comes up, I'm more like, well, if you want to ask me a question, I'm happy to answer it. But I'm not really willing to argue with you. I don't feel any need to argue with you, because I don't have any desire to convince you, and I don't feel in any way insecure in my own beliefs. So there's no point in an argument. But if you want to ask me a question, I'll answer it. And you could put a counter position and I'll explain my position, but I'm not going to go on and on and on in some argument with somebody who clearly doesn't believe it and doesn't even really, isn't really even open at the end of the day to any viewpoint other than their own. The only time I might, to some degree, have to do that is if I was doing an interview with a journalist or on TV or something, and I needed to really fight my corner, not for my own sake or for their sake, but for the sake of those who might be listening or watching, who did really want to know the truth. But even then, I'd only take it so far. I mean, you can state your position, and that's it, really. It is not our obligation in any sense to go on and on and on and on and on about what we believe. It's our job to share what we believe, to help people to understand it, to answer questions, but that is it.
I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day, and he's quite an open-minded guy, and I was explaining, I think I got onto the subject where I played him something about drug addicts. Dr. King says that they damage their aura and they go to the lower realms when you're reborn on the lower realms, and your aura is very distorted, not very pretty to look at, and you suffer quite a lot for that. And he said, well, that really didn't resonate with him, and he discerned, he used his logic and his and his judgment, and he said that that someone like the teachings like the Dalai Lama or some teachings based on love, but that you wouldn't suffer like that for some actions that you did in this life, because it could have been him. He had a bad childhood. He could have been a drug addict, but he wouldn't be punished like that. So
but it's not punishment. Okay. In cosmic terms, in divine terms, there is no such thing as punishment. But let's take this example. Let's say that someone is a very nice, spiritual, good person, and they decide one evening it's a lovely summer's evening, they decide to sort of go running about outside, and they're on holiday at the time, and they just walk out of their hotel room and they start running about beautiful, clean grass, lovely, fresh air. And what they don't realize is that their hotel is actually on the edge of a cliff. And they're running around, very happy and spiritual and all that, and they jump off the edge of the cliff. Now, however happy and spiritual they are, if they jump off a cliff, they're going to die. Yeah? It's not, and the fact that they die through jumping off the cliff is not a judgment on their morality or their goodness in any way. It's just what happens if you jump off cliffs. Yeah, it's just an aspect. Everything is an aspect of the law of God, but it's not the kind of, in inverted commas, moral or spiritual aspect. These divisions are actually, quite superficial, quite terrestrial viewpoints, I think, because to a more advanced mind, everything is God, and therefore everything that happens is an aspect of the law of God, and you can't sort of separate and categorize things in the way that we might try to on this planet. But the bottom line is, if you do something that's dangerous, and it has a bad result, it has a bad result. It's not about punishment, it's just what happens. Yeah. And through the lives you learn. And this is one of the very beautiful things about, well, I was going to say about Aetherius Society teachings, but really it's the beautiful things about God is that no one is ever beyond redemption. Even literally Satan himself, or the aspects of Satan, whatever they now may be, will one day return to God. It doesn't matter how bad you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. You will one day become an advanced being. The only difference is, I suppose there's various ways of looking at it, but one difference is how long it takes. Is it going to take you, well, with the best will in the world, well, I don't know about you, Jack, but speaking for myself, I mean, with the best will in the world, I don't think I could become a master in this life, even if I did everything right, which I don't do, to be honest. I don't know how many lives, but it'd be an interesting question to know the answer to. But I mean, let's say theoretically it might be 10. Yeah, if I did everything I was meant to do. Yeah.
Okay.
So I could be looking at cosmic consciousness in 10 lives, or if I'm lazy, or if I, worse still, sort of turn to the dark side, it could be millions of lives away. Yeah. So that's the issue. It's not if, it's when. And you could get someone who might be a bit flippant and say, oh well, that's all right then, so I can do whatever I like. To which my answer would be, well, yes, you can, if you're willing to suffer for millions of lives and to make other people suffer too, through your inaction or your wrong action. So, but yes, it is a choice. We can see it's a choice because it happens. Yeah, we're not forced to the light, not in the immediate sense, anyway. In our ignorance, it might be nice if we were, sort of theoretically, but that's not how life is, and it's not how life should be either. Because this is the law of God. We do have free will, but as lower aspects of God, we might misuse that free will, but there will come a time when we tire of that. And we see, it's a little bit like what I was saying in the beginning, actually, Jack, when I sort of gave up arguing about the teachings and more said, okay, I don't understand this. It might not seem immediately obvious to me, but I'm going to assume it's correct and try to understand it. I gave up the approach of, no, that's wrong, and I'm going to tell you why it's wrong, because it always turned out that I was wrong. And that wasn't because anyone was, by the way, sort of browbeating me into this view. It was very much just that logically that's just the way it was. And I had a lot of time to reflect on that without anyone trying to convince me one way or the other. Or if anything, I'd say most of the contact I had probably with other people at that time was probably people trying to dissuade me from it rather than persuade me. But there you go.
I guess once you accept reincarnation as an idea, and then you, like you say, you take that into the silence and you think about it, then everything that has a beginning must have an end. There must be a reason for this, and modern science says there's no reason for life, there's no purpose. But if we're in this reincarnatory cycle, we must have had a beginning and an end, and so we're going somewhere. And when you read a book like The Nine Freedoms, and then it lays it all out there, it's just, that really makes sense, though.
Yeah, well, this scientific thing about, well, so-called scientific thing about, various things having no reason is a very unscientific approach. Because, okay, you could say, as sort of, evolution as physics, as understood through Darwinism and all that, and there's a lot to be said for that, I think, as well as a kind of different topic, a big topic. But it doesn't explain consciousness. It doesn't explain self-awareness. Not really. And it doesn't explain why anything should exist at all. I mean, that's the big question. Why does anything exist at all? And the scientists will say, well, it's the Big Bang. Okay, fine. I've nothing against the Big Bang. But why was there a Big Bang? What banged? What was there to bang? Yeah? It doesn't really get to the nub of the question of why. Why does anything exist at all? Why does that which exists, in some cases at least, know it exists? Why is there consciousness? Why does anything happen at all? Why isn't there just nothing? And I'd be quite interested to ask a scientist what they'd have to say on this. I believe in science a lot, and I'm not very educated in science, but I have a lot of respect for the scientific approach, and I try to sort of be as how can I put it, sort of as orthodox as possible with regard to science. But I'm sometimes very disappointed with scientifically minded people. I remember I used to, many years ago, I used to discuss this kind of thing a lot with a friend of mine who got a first in physics at Cambridge. And he was a very intelligent guy, very nice guy, but just didn't really seem to engage with the questions that I was asking. Mm-hmm. He could argue about very well about certain maybe psychic phenomena or one specific case or something like that he might have looked into. He could come up with quite a lot about that, rightly or wrongly, but he couldn't really, and didn't seem very interested even really in embracing the real big question: why does anything exist at all? And to say that there is no reason, in my opinion, is a very unscientific approach, because you're saying that something came from nothing, which is fundamentally contrary, in my limited understanding anyway, is contrary to everything we know about science. That there's always a reason. So there must be a reason why anything exists at all. And I would say that reason is God. And then the scientists, I can almost hear them now sort of throwing their hands up in the air and saying, oh, so you think some old man on a cloud, invented creation? No, I don't. I don't really know what God is. It's certainly not an old man on a cloud, because even that very notion is an aspect of manifestation. It's not that which precedes manifestation. Therefore, it cannot be the cause of manifestation. But whatever that amazing, miraculous, non-dualistic principle is behind manifestation, that's God. So I'd say, rather than sort of imagining God as a man on a cloud and thinking of that man on a cloud creating manifestation, I'd say in some ways it's better to think of manifestation, of creation, of the universe, time and space, etc., and think, well, whatever is behind that is God. So it's more of a question: what could be behind that, rather than us imposing a kind of anthropomorphic idea of God onto this principle, imagining it being like us, which happens all too often. There's a quote actually, which I think is I think it's often attributed to one of the French philosophers. I forget if it's Rousseau or Descartes. But anyway, whichever one it was, it turns out that the origin of this quote actually is a bit more nebulous. But it's words to the effect of God created man in his own image, and man, being a gentleman, returned the favour. So, in other words, we have created a kind of a false God in our own image, a God with emotions and favoritism and, I would say, very questionable morals, quite frankly. I mean, sending someone to hell for all eternity for not believing in you, I mean, that's pretty nasty, I would say.
I speak to a lot of scientists on this show, and firstly, you can't. It's difficult to argue with them because they're so intelligent, and secondly, they're right because, like you say, all these the men made a lot of aspects of the religion, and the dark forces had a lot of handiwork in that, but when you see these,
the dark forces, but I think also we shouldn't underestimate the seemingly almost infinite power of just basic human stupidity. It's not just a case of the dark forces. Of course, it is a factor, but I mean, people just get things wrong. People remember things wrong, if remember is the word, but they think they remember things which they don't. They think they know more than they do. They make assumptions. Well, I say we. We all do this to one degree or another. If we didn't, we'd be far more enlightened people. But even people with the best will in the world will make certain mistakes. If you've got two good people, let's say, who both have a good motive but are still limited people, there's something that's a bit questionable about a certain religion, they might easily come to differing viewpoints, both of which might be wrong.
Mm.
Give it a few generations and then you have two different religions as a result. And this is one reason why motive is so important, because although you could make a mistake, even with a very good motive, if you really cultivate motive through the lives, then it becomes, let's say, less and less likely that you're going to make a big mistake. Because your motive will guide you. So, at the kind of stage that we're at now, unfortunately, any of us could make a mistake, and let's hope to God it's not a big one when we do. But if we, keep at our firm intention to have the best motive we can, which is service to others, selfless service to others, then through the lives, it'll become increasingly improbable that we're going to make a big mistake that's going to really seriously impact on our own evolution or the evolution of others.
Yeah. I try to remember that service to others, but even when I'm emptying my inbox, I put a little note up there, try and answer this every email that you're trying to help the person who you send an email to, and it makes it a lot more pleasurable experience to churn through the emails, I found.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a good thought, actually. I could probably apply that a lot more in my own life, because a lot of the emails I get, I don't really welcome very much, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, every experience, whether we like it or not, is an opportunity for us to learn and grow.
Yeah. There's this big misunderstanding about God now. I mean, people think, man with beard, but if it's everything and everything in existence and not in existence, if it's everything, you can't really argue against the infinite universe and all of the functions of nature. I mean, if you say, even scientists would say, okay, if you want to call that God, okay, well, I believe in that, because it's
Yeah,
there. It's the law of
well,
physics. It's everything.
well, yeah, well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That is what it is. I mean, so, well, let's team up with the scientists then, if that's what they believe. Really happy to do that.
But then
I
they come
agree.
on and they come on and argue against consciousness, and it's kind of like they're arguing against their own existence now. They're conscious beings talking to me, and they're saying that they don't exist. I mean,
Yeah, it's a big. That's a big topic. Consciousness. I think that's the topic of a podcast in itself, really.
or a few, yeah. But it's
Um,
always with consciousness makes
yes.
matter, or matter makes consciousness. And that's what they always argue against.
Yeah, I don't really think I can do it justice in just a few sentences, to be honest. But no, you're right though. I mean, it's not even the subject of one podcast. It's the subject. Well, it's the subject. It's the ultimate subject of all existence, really, for all eternity, isn't it? If you take it to the extreme. But yeah, I mean, well, I think just one thought on that subject is, okay, you could come up with all kinds of arguments about, consciousness in inverted commas being necessary for survival of the fittest and all that, and probably a lot of good points in all of that, but it still doesn't answer the question of why does it exist at all? Why does survival of the fittest exist if that's the ultimate truth in their minds? Why does a planet exist? Why does anything exist at all?
So, in the Aetherius Society, what would be the reason for all of it?
God. Sorry if that sounds like a cop-out answer, but I mean that is the answer.
But could you go into the different aspects of, because there's ideas in the beliefs of the Aetherius Society which you don't encounter in other religions? Maybe you could go into the cosmic aspect.
Well, thinking of the 7 dimensions of creation, another big subject, but remember the sort of the top dimension, if I might use that word, is divine will. And thereafter is mind. It would seem, in short, that all of creation is the result of divine will and is, in effect, the mind of God. So we are, in a sense, figments of God's imagination. Does that mean we're not real? Well, we are real in that we are what we are, but we're not real in the sense of the ultimate, unchangeable reality that is God. If a divine will did not exist and had not created mind, divine mind, you might call it, then nothing would exist at all. There would simply be divinity. And yet, at the same time, there is nothing but divinity. This is when really, it's quite enjoyable to talk about these things, but to really even begin to grasp them, you do need to spend some time just thinking about it all. Here's a little idea. I suggested this to a friend, and who was not in the Aetherius Society, and he told me that it had a massive effect on him. I said, tomorrow when you're going to work, don't let it. He was on the bus, he wasn't driving, but don't let it distract you too much if you're driving or something. But whatever you're doing, just look around you and think everything you see is an aspect of the mind of God. Everything you see has divine potential. Everything you see exists for a reason, however good or bad it may be, however weird it may be to us that such a thing may have any purpose whatsoever, it does. To embrace the allness of God, basically. And you can do this. I'm trying to do it a bit now while I'm talking to you. I'm slightly distracting myself because I'm talking, but I'm looking around and I'm thinking, and I'm seeing things in a totally different way. But I'm seeing, my room here's got quite a few sort of messy things or things that need cleaning and what have you. But however messy or unclean it may be, even that is an aspect of God. And just applying this simple practice of looking around and realizing that it's not saying, therefore, that everything's okay. It's not saying, okay, well, I've got a dirty dish there, but because it's an aspect of God, I never need to clean it. It's not saying that. Rather, it's a bit simplistic, but rather I would say that, the reason for the dirty dish being there is so that I have to clean it. To sort of teach me about discipline and hygiene and all. It's a bit simplistic, I know, because then you could ask, well, why do you need discipline? Why do you need hygiene? But it's, it doesn't mean you don't need to do anything.
Right.
It's a little paradoxical, because you could say, yeah, but if I didn't ever clean that dish, by the same token, that would be an aspect of God too. And my answer to that would be yes. But do you really want to spend the rest of your life living next to a dirty dish? Yeah? Or would you rather live in a nice clean home with a clean dish? It might seem silly even to talk in this way, but it's a very basic manifestation of a much deeper point.
I think Shivananda had a poem like "In God I Saw." Does that ring a bell?
It doesn't. I'm a big fan of Shivananda, but I do not know that poem.
I think it was. But yeah, like even when you're enlightened, when you're a son, or you just get a deeper understanding of that one basic truth, of that simplicity, and maybe that's something to talk about too in the Aetherius Society, that the sun is a conscious being, the God in the Bible is the sun, the earth is a conscious being. We're on an evolutionary, but we're evolving into the sun, into the earth. And the galaxy is a conscious being.
With regards to the sun, I think if you said to somebody, you know what, there's this magic ball in the sky that is this beautiful gold and white color that enables everything on our planet to live. It sounds like something out of science fiction. It sounds like a fantasy thing.
Made everything on the planet.
Yeah, and then yet it's true. We have, and if you, obviously you shouldn't sort of stare at the sun because it'll hurt your eyes, but just an appreciation of the sun when we're walking around. You probably have more appreciation than I do because you live in a nice sunny country. But wherever you live, you're going to have some idea of what the sun is. And, just think about what an amazing thing it is. Just looking, even without the Aetherius Society or any religious beliefs whatsoever, you've got this thing that gives us light, warmth, and basically nourishes, together with the earth herself, everything that we need. It's quite an extraordinary thing. And it's not really that big a leap to regard it as a divine being.
Yeah, many religions, but even before the cosmic, even before Christianity or Buddhism or any of the main religions, they worship the sun, no?
Yeah, it's kind of gone out of fashion a bit, unfortunately, hasn't it? I can't think of any.
They do in a small tribal.
Yeah, I can't think of any religion with a sort of large number of adherents in the modern world that recognize the divinity of the sun or the earth.
But the Bible is based on the Son, no, the spoken
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
How is that? How did that work, and how did that get taken out, or how is that hidden in the
Uh,
Bible?
well, let's just. I've got the 12 blessings in front of me, so this is in the blessing to the sun, and let's just read the words. If you, my children, would change from men to God men, you would send your love always towards this great being which you now take for granted. For this is the God of your Bible. It is the Brahma of the Hindu scripts. This is the nearest thing to God in your concept of manifestation. So, okay, I'm not really qualified to understand all of that, of course, but I'm nevertheless going to take a stab at it, at some of it. I don't think it means that in the Bible, the scribes of old knew that God was the Son, and then somehow they either lied or forgot or it got changed. I don't think they knew.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they did, I don't think it was common knowledge. Maybe some of them did. I think that, and similarly, as far as Brahma and the Hindu scripts are concerned, I don't think this is a case really of people knowing and making a mistake or consciously deceiving. I think what this statement is about is more to do with the nearest thing to God in your concept of manifestation. I think it's more about our concept of manifestation. So I think it's more saying that even if we enter cosmic consciousness and have a very profound realization of God, it isn't really going to extend beyond an understanding of what the sun is.
Mm.
So that's a little clumsily put, I'm afraid, but I think that's the essence of it. There have been religions, of course, that have openly embraced the fact that the sun is divine, and that's quite an interesting subject because I think it's a big deal, to put it mildly. To make that one realization, it's I shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. There's an episode of The Simpsons where there's something about sun worship,
Mm-hmm.
and there's something about how ridiculous it is, and Bart says, words to the effect of, "Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Worshipping the sun." Thank goodness we've come to our senses now, and we don't do that anymore. Now we just worship a carpenter who we've never met, who lived 2,000 years ago. I mean, no disrespect, of course, to the Master Jesus, but in the Aetherius Society, we have the utmost reverence for the Master Jesus, but we don't believe he is God, as, the ultimate divine manifestation. And Jesus himself certainly did not believe that. In fact, Jesus has given us, the most profound concept of what God is. And it's certainly not himself, as an entity. So it's just a little illustration, I think, of how conditioning affects beliefs so much. And sun worship, it seems like this sort of weird, primitive, ancient thing. But, we really analyze beliefs that many people have today that are completely socially acceptable. They're pretty far out when it comes to it. I mean, why would God have one son who was also himself, who would be born just once, 2,000 years ago, to save us from sins that presumably God himself had created because God created everything? And, and so it goes on. There's endless questions. And then what about people who've never heard of Jesus? And, is it fair for people to go to eternal hell? All these things, all very good questions. But it's quite, there are people in certain mainstream religions. Whether they really believe it today or not, I don't know. But their religions certainly support these notions, and it's certainly permissible at the very least, if not even advisable in these religions to hold such beliefs. And they are far more way out in logical terms than the idea that the sun is a god or that Jesus is an advanced being from another planet. I mean, these are completely rational concepts. And, I think hopefully not too long, maybe, times are changing, maybe even in a matter of decades, there'll be a big shift in this regard. If not decades, then certainly in centuries. And if not in centuries, then I think probably that'll be the end of mankind on Earth. We can't carry on forever with our insanity as it is at present.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I could keep talking to you all day, Mark, but I've got to do the 12 blessings in a little bit. So.
Yes, absolutely. It's 10 minutes, isn't it? Yeah. Well, that was about an hour, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was great. That was super helpful. Thank you so much. And I've definitely got inspiration for a song about the sun.
Oh, yeah. I look forward to hearing it. The first time I've ever had a song.
I think it has to be about the sun. So we'll narrow it down.
Okay, great. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Look forward to it. Great. Okay. Well, many thanks, Jack. All the best.
Thanks again for your time. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed that. Please check out the Aetherius Society website, aetherius.org, aethrius.org. And if you like the song, you can hear it on Deezer, iTunes, Spotify, all the usual streaming channels. Please subscribe on there, click follow, like, share it, add it to a playlist, and also on your podcast app, if you could also write a review, click 5 stars, share it, that would also help the show tremendously. Thanks again to my musicians, Mauricio San Nicola and Massimino Vodza, and my researcher, Dori Verbo. See you next time.